about, or maybe it was from our principal, I read something about we're committing to whatever we registered for, online, homeschool, whatever, we're committing for the quarter. I mean, at each quarter or at like midpoint in the year, are we allowed to reassess?
Really good question. So we set it at grading period, okay? Because I know that our schools are all a little bit different in how they report grades and what that time frame is. They're not all the same. So whenever that first grade comes home, and usually that's mid-October, end of October, we're asking for staffing purposes that we go to a grading period. Many districts are requiring either a semester or a full year. It does make it a little bit complicated in how we allocate FTE. If, for example, many of the parents that have students online suddenly shift to in-person, and so we're just asking for that grading period so that we can anticipate those projections and then move teachers if we need to back to in-person or from in-person to online. But we also recognize we want our parents to have as close a window as they can to making that decision in that time frame, right? So one grading period is what we're asking.
I just have a question. Where are you getting the teachers for online?
So the way that this is actually happening as we speak, so this is a very complicated process. So how this will work is today, actually yesterday, today, and tomorrow at their level meetings. So our principals are working with our school performance team and our ISD team to reallocate teachers from the school. So our approach is this. One, we're starting with site-based, right? So we want to try to keep our students connected as close to as they can to their neighborhood school teachers. And then from there, we'll go to cluster, right? So we'll try to move as best we can within a group of 3 or 4 schools, and then if need be, to accommodate those needs, we'll move district-wide. There's 3 factors that we're looking at. One, we're trying to accommodate and protect our high-risk teachers first. Okay, that's a priority. Not the only priority though, but it's a high consideration. And they've requested that. Yeah, they've gone through a process in HR to do that, and there's very specific guidelines from the federal government through ADA, right, that outline what that is. And so we want to try to accommodate those teachers if we can. Secondly is by site, and third is by skill set, right? I mean, we want to try to get people that are comfortable in an online environment. And so that's going to be a little complicated because at the elementary level, that's allocated by grade level, right? So it's much easier. In the secondary level, it's allocated by course request. So it may not be as likely that if you choose online that 100% of your online teachers would be from your secondary school. It could come from other secondary schools in the district, but we're actually going through that process right now. Question?
What happens to, say, choir teachers since you no longer have choir?
If they get sick, if they're positive. Yeah. So Steve Diamond, I've kind of left that to our HR department, and I know they have a huge protocol that they're working through to try to get the best people possible to fill those roles. One of the things that we did to help that very question is usually in the district in the first 2 to 3 months there are large-scale professional development days where massive number of teachers are taken out of the building and subs have to fill those. We're postponing all of those and suspending those at least I think up and through the semester, so December, so that we have a pool of subs that have the skill sets necessary to fill those roles. And then from there there's another layer of support. Then we would move to coaches and content specialists, and we've committed at the district level, if need be, if all of us need to be in classes to support and make sure our students get what they need, then we will do so. So that's kind of the process of what we're going through.
Can I clarify some of your questions? Did you say that you heard that we're not going to have choir classes?
I heard somebody say that you can't do choir
Oh, no, we're having it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you noticed, just recently, there was a study put out by Colorado State that National Federation of High Schools has adopted, and it actually has the guidelines. And we have committed all of the provisions in there. There are special face coverings. Obviously, in a choir class or band, the respiratory output is going to be much higher than a regular class. And so there are some additional provisions that are in there when it comes to face coverings and coverings for instruments and how they distance and how they rehearse. But it's our full intention to offer those courses.
Yes, we do have, in fact, our marching band has been practicing all summer long. We were out listening to them just the other day. They sound fantastic.
There's actually these special bell covers that go over the instruments. So it's pretty amazing stuff. Okay, question?
In the event that the schools do close, obviously the students would continue their regular coursework. How does that affect the dual language immersion program? Would they continue to still do part of their classes in the language they're learning, or would they revert back to the regular classroom?
That's a really good question. And I'm probably not the right expert to answer that fully. Dr. Landry would be better to answer that. But having said that, if we're closed, it's likely going to be under the direction of the health department. So it wouldn't really be our choice on closing or not. But my thought, and I know this is all in the works, just trying to, from a peripheral, watch this. The state has been closely working with school DLI districts to create online DLI curriculum that in that event they would remain in that language. But I'm not for sure on that. This has changed by the minute over the summer with the visa issue as well. And so that would be my vision for that, is that we can continue that way. But I'll get Dr. Landward to answer that question for you. We'll get something out through Susan.
Thank you.
You bet.
I just have a quick question. I know with last year we didn't have to make up the time because we were shut down, and I'm assuming that would be the same. But with this just a week later, from what I heard from the board meetings, we would not be making up that time, that the schedule for the rest of the year stays the same, and that we still kind of end on the same day and vacation.
Yes, everything will stay the same. So I'm in communication right now with Superintendent Dixon, and the state allows for 4 professional development days that are counted as instruction that Canyons has not utilized for I think the last year or 2 years. And so we would be utilizing those 4 days and then request a waiver for 1, which would account for those 5 days. So the return time for our teachers, our staff, all remains the same. Calendar remains the same. Nothing would change that way. Okay.
Lady on the far side here.
Yes.
Hey, I'm Joanne from Israel. I'm just going to try and get 3 questions.
Okay.
The first one is, I got a forward an email from a teacher in our school who is starting a GoFundMe to try and get air purifiers in each classroom in our school. And I'm
is a lot of that information is protected, you know, under FERPA. And I'm not sure, I guess school by school, there is directory information that you may be able to, you know, to access that way, but I totally agree on, you know, the building that community the best that you can. I think that's a great learning lesson that we all experience. I will take that question back to our leadership team and get something back through Susan on some ideas that could help. But going back to your first question, we know through epidemiologists and the research that airflow is an important factor to reducing risk, right? And so two things that are happening across the district to help with that. One is, well, I can think of at least three things. One is that all of our air filtration systems will be at the standard that's recommended. And I don't know exactly, you know, what that terminology means. Apparently we've had different air filters for different buildings. A lot of that's determined by the age of the building. But the plan is to have every building at least at a MERV 8 level for filter. My encouragement has been the best that we can, especially in buildings that will allow it, is to move to a 13, which it's thinner, but it's stronger. It has to be replaced more often, but it does act as a stronger barrier against a virus like COVID. The second part to that is that normally our systems are really built around efficiency, so when they're turned on and off, and the level of airflow is determined, you know, by that efficiency rating and how that is, I guess, with heat and cold in the building. Our plan is to turn those settings to occupation, I think it's called occupation or occupied, which essentially is a high level of airflow starting in the elementaries at 5 a.m. until 8 p.m. So we are going to run our buildings a lot less efficiently, but that's the right thing to do, and it will help with this very issue. And then in our secondary schools, they'll be turned on from 5 a.m. until 12 a.m. So all the way through the day. The individual air filtering system, I would hope they would work through their principal and the district. I know in our HR and our purchasing and capital folks, those teachers that are high risk, that's something that they can request and that I think we've been working on. I do have a little bit of nervousness about people going out and buying, you know, individual air filtration systems if they don't know exactly how they're cleaned and how often and how they work. And so I would just encourage people that may be, you know, there to work through the principal or, you know, contact the district. So if that's something that they want to do, that, you know, that it meets a certain standard so that everybody in the room stays safe.
There would be funding for that?
We started out with high risk. That's kind of where we began that process. We haven't had discussions about individual air filtration systems in every single classroom. And I'm not speaking for our HVAC guys, but my understanding is at this point that's not necessary. But I know those, you know, that fear level people have, or something that they may read, may change that, but I will take that back and ask if that's a direction that we're going. But for teachers that are high risk, I would encourage them to contact us so we can help them.
Yeah,
And let me just jump, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, thank you, Dr. Robbins. If we do have an employee or a teacher who does have a concern, we would encourage them to go to their administrator so they can work with our risk management department on the types of products that we know will not be damaging to the environment and that have been approved for use in our schools. If we have folks out there who go and do their own thing through GoFundMe, and it may not be a piece of equipment that we regularly use in our schools, it introduces a level of risk. Our risk management department is fantastic in working with employees who express concern, and in the past with some employees who have had asthma and have wanted those HEPA filters, when they worked the process, went to their supervisor, our risk management office has been able to get to them the equipment they needed that didn't introduce a level of risk throughout the entire building. So that's what we would encourage. Plus, we just don't want to put that in the laps of our teachers of having to set up a GoFundMe and take the onus upon themselves. We do have a process in place, and that's what we would encourage them to follow.
And I would add to that on the GoFundMe, any individual staff member is welcome to fundraise for themselves personally, any way they choose, but we do not typically use GoFundMe to push out to our parents in our schools. Teachers don't have individual fundraisers. There are some avenues that are set up in the district to raise funds for classes. Donors choose through the foundation. There's some additional ways to do that, but we ask, generally speaking, that teachers do not create their own personal funding source and push that out to parents. They can obviously do what they want personally and individually outside of school, but it shouldn't be being pushed out to our parents or our school community through GoFundMe.
Just, there's one other important thing to this too. So you may be getting parents or people in your school in circle of influence that wants to donate hand sanitizer or wipes or different things for their classes. So we're open to accept those. We know that that's going to be a need through the year. The district has already spent $1 million on PPE equipment and all of the safety provisional items like that. But remember how that process works is that we would take those items in, and then they're put in our warehouse, and they're actually screened through it's called MDS, so it's a material data sheet, and that is a screening of all of the chemicals that are in those hand sanitizer or wipes or whatever that we collect. And if they meet the state and federal standards to then go back into classrooms, then we would allow that. But that's kind of the process that we're following to make sure that what enters the classroom is safe and not going to burn somebody's hands or face.
So just to clarify on that point just a little bit, so we know that parents will donate, and out of the goodness of your heart, you may not be out buying wipes and hand sanitizers. You can find them for your teachers. They will come into each, either into the foundation office or into each school's main office. They won't go into the classrooms. They will come into the central warehouse, as he said, and then they will be redispersed back out to classrooms if they meet the standards, or obviously the ones that we have bought that do meet the standards. If for some reason they don't meet the standards that we work with, then we will either redirect them to our pantries for family that would like to use those different sources, but they will be coming into the main offices, not out into the classrooms if they're donating from the public.
Can I just ask my third
Yeah.
question real quick? And that is, as we've been deciding, it's been really, and let me preface this with, I have so much gratitude and empathy for everybody who's making decisions and taking all these different experiences with families across the district and trying to create policy and action for so many different circumstances. So one of the things we struggle with is trying to decide between parent-led and district-led online learning, and we just don't know have no idea what parent-led looks like compared to. We've never homeschooled before, and I don't see it as being it's not really homeschooling. We're still attached to our school, right?
Yeah. Yes. No. Yeah. You're just utilizing the district's curriculum materials really and then guide the instruction yourself.
So would the main difference be that you're not going to have online FaceTime with a teacher?
Correct. Right. That's correct. Yep. You would have all the resources to utilize, but it would be solely the parent's responsibility to deliver instruction.
To deliver instruction and to test and grade?
Well, the student, to do it, to make this occur, the student has to be enrolled with a teacher of record, right? So our online teachers will be a teacher of record, but the parent is responsible to deliver the instruction. At the grading period, what I've asked our principals to do is work with those teachers to either assign a pass-fail based on their coordination with the parent. But I see it being solely up to the parent to inform us on what they want us to enter there. It really is driven by the parent. One aspect to that, though, is that by following that pathway, you do still have we want them to have access to counselors, school support, administration, during that process. So you're not solely on an island by yourself.
So we're trying to weigh the pros and cons of one versus the other, and I just don't get it enough.
It's new, right? Yeah, it's new. And
Yeah.
there are issues we're going to have to work through.
So but again, one of the things we learned in the spring is that trying to get an 11
encourage that.
And so we're curious about if the parent-led option allows for more flexibility, like is the main pro that allows more flexibility, or is the main pro to it, you know?
If you want to teach the instruction, do the parent directed. If you want one of our teachers to provide that instruction each week, do the online. That's the simplest.
So much of the teacher instruction online is directing to a site, and so is that the difference?
Well, but they also have the scheduled office hours. You're collaborating with them, problem solving, asking questions, clarifying,
Okay,
all through the online.
okay, thank you.
Would it be possible for the district to put out a list of, like, the sanitizing products that are approved, or like if you want to donate to the class,
That's a great idea.
here's
Yeah.
the 10 things we recommend if you.
That's all. Can you?
I don't know, that's
Yeah.
just a thought.
We have that through the foundation. We're not getting too specific on the donations because some of the ones that are the grade that we're going to be using are very hard for parents to find, and so we don't want everybody freaking out that they can't find some things, and we will put to use anything that is donated. Just know that in the classroom it's a different grade. But we do have lists, and I can get those to you, of needed items district-wide, not necessarily in schools. Brooke?
Did dual language immersion, okay, the elementary students specifically that chose the online option, did dual language immersion get added to curriculum, or, because what I'm hearing and what I guess is the most confusing is you choose online and you're completely separate from your, homeschool classroom, but if you choose to go in person and then you are not able to attend in person, you get to be online with that teacher and still get those.
Okay, yeah, there's a difference, right? So if you choose in person, we're supporting students that stay home for whatever reason on campus, but it is not at the same level as the online teachers that are solely teaching online. There's a difference there. So, for example, if you choose in person and your student stays home, then that teacher would not be providing, 1 hour of Google Meets while they're home. That what they would be asked to do is to just go onto Canvas. It would be a lot more self-guided and directed with support, but it's not at the same level as online because the teacher is teaching in person, each day. But we've asked them to bolster their Canvas page to a level that runs parallel with their class, so that it really, at the end, to me, it should become a tool. You kind of think about in the past, pre-COVID, and in our own experience, when you miss school, it's always a makeup when you return, right? You come back to school, then you sit down with your teacher, and you get this plan to make up for what you missed. What I would envision is that if their Canvas pages are updated, and we've made improvements there, and really, leveled that up, that when a student goes out, that they're able to keep pace as best as possible. But it does look different than what a student would experience online.
Will DLI be provided or supported?
My understanding it is online that we were able to do that, and I don't know exactly how Dr. Landward's working that curriculum, but I believe that it is available online.
And let me just clarify one thing on that. If a student is required to quarantine for about 2 weeks, they don't transition to the online instruction with the teacher. It really only is with that Canvas. And I appreciate Dr. Robbins mentioning, like if you went on vacation in the past or if they were sick, you really were at the mercy of the teacher, and if they had created a Canvas page, what resources they had provided that way. Now it'll be available during that 2 weeks to engage with, but not necessarily that online interaction with the teacher.
I'm gonna, out of necessity of time, we told Tanya that we would wrap this up about 10:30, so we're gonna take one more question I've been seeing here in the middle. And then people will be around. You can always, as with every parent, If you email communications.canyonsdistrict.org, they will always get back to you with direction and guidance. Jeff and Kirsten in our communications department are fantastic at making sure all questions are answered or getting the answers if you need to some other way. Anyway, so, and we too, I'll be here for the rest of the day. I don't know how many of you are staying, but we'll be around to answer other questions as they come up during the president's training. We just don't want to cut too far into your time for that. You had,
So before you answer, before you ask your question, just can I make a request? If you do have a question about the upcoming school year, or any question at all about Canyon School District, I'd ask you to reach out to us either by telephone or send an email to one of us directly or to communications@canyonsdistrict.org. One of the places that we're trying to moderate is social media, but it gets very difficult to try to stay on top of what's really a question and what are people just stating their opinions, which is fine, because that's one way we do get input. But in order for us to directly communicate with you, answer your questions, and perhaps even enter into a dialogue, it's best if you send us that email so we can get you what you need. So please, if you think, well, I've posted on their Facebook page and they're just not answering me, a lot of it's because we get up to 500 comments on some of our posts, and some of that really we really don't know if you're truly seeking information from us, or if you just want to.
Or it's how Dr. Robbins was dressed at board meetings.
So
please, just reach out to us one-on-one, and we're happy to work with you.
thanks, Jeff. I think we had two people that have had their hands up for a while, so we'll start right here and then finish with the last one. Go ahead.
I was on the call this week for my high schoolers for sports, and the principal was on the call, and she mentioned that there was a large misconception that if you chose online for your child, it would be the grading scale that was in the spring. And she said, I've talked to many, many parents this week that said, well, I chose online because the grading scale is going to be lower than it was. And she said, that's not true, the grading scale is going back.
It is going back to, yeah.
I'm just wondering how many other misconceptions there were.
Right.
Can you just verify?
Yes, so as of now, and I think this is a place for some growth, is that to start, the grading scale will revert back to what it was pre-COVID. Okay, so, and hopefully we'll work through that. As you recall, when we closed schools, the amount of trauma and just the tidal wave of impact that had, pretty much across the state in our country, all grading scales pretty much went away, and it was simply just, let's try to get through this the best that we can with no harm to anyone. But I think, going forward, I've talked to President Tini about this, is likely it will look different in how we measure teaching and learning, because we're kind of starting at a new baseline, right? And we don't know exactly what kind of loss has occurred. And so, I think it's important that as we go forward, we start to kind of think about growth and mastery, maybe more than compliance and a checklist. That's just from Superintendent Robbins. I'm not speaking for anyone else. But I think those issues will emerge as we get into this new, I don't want to say new normal because everybody says that, but it is, right? It is kind of a new way of how this will occur. So, but as of now, as we start, the grading scale will go back to what it was pre-COVID.
And I think the last question, I think, was it Ann? Was over here. I think Ann, sorry. Go ahead.
So my question is relates to principals. I'm sure they're very, very busy trying to figure all this out. But I'm sure they have some concerns about volunteers coming into the school as well. And hopefully we can all get them. Also, I'd like to address what if you're not in agreement, a working agreement as the PTA with the principal.
So I can maybe address the first part. I'm not as familiar with the agreements. So one of the recommendations that's come out through CDC is really thinking about adult respiratory output, right? And I've heard many epidemiologists and pediatricians and people that I'm collaborating with actually say that their concern is not as much for our students, but much more for the adults in the building, that the respiratory output for adults it is much more of an issue. And so, having said that, right, I think the idea is to begin with is to try to lower adult respiratory output, and adults gathering in small rooms together and taking off their masks and talking, especially if they're hyped up or we're passionate about something, we really can push out heavy viral load. And so that's kind of why the principals are in this mode right now of let's kind of start out a little bit slower with the number of volunteers that are present and just kind of see how that works. But on the other side of that, all the principals that I talk to, and I've made an effort to get out into every school. I'm not sure I've met with every single principal. I'm pretty close, but they are all, very excited and worried too about really engaging our volunteers and getting them back into our schools, because the roles that volunteers and you've all played are absolutely critical and essential. So I think it's just going to have to be a process of working and with our principals and kind of working through the details of getting that back up to speed. But can you talk to the agreements?
Well, I think I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but let me, and then Nancy, and you can answer this, where we're trying to kind of get the volunteers returned after a couple of weeks, but some principals have reached out and expressed that they need their volunteers for such and such on the first few days. And I'm guessing if a principal has that need and has reached out to their PTA, that
They
they
have
would
that
honor
response.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, in the plan, where it talks about volunteers for essential purposes, so a lot of that definition is left up to the individual schools of what is essential. And so there's not a hardline prohibition against certain volunteers. It is up to the schools. There's also not a hardline deadline. The principals have asked for, as has been said, a week or two or something to kind of get things going and to help identify what their needs are. But it doesn't mean that they're required to take that week or two, but they're allowed that week or two. That's my understanding.
And just a quick reminder that as volunteers, when you come into the building, you'll be required to just do a quick symptom check or get your temperature checked. So if you're running from your car into the school, just like slow down, take a deep breath, right? Maybe take a quick drink of water, because if your temperature is elevated, you'll have to wait like 5 minutes before you can get your temperature checked again. But if your temperature is elevated, they won't allow you into the building. So just pay attention to your time. Like if you're running late, just walk in, try to bring that down a little bit.
All right.
What's considered an elevated?
100.4.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's,
All right, we're going to wrap this up so that Tanya
Thank
can
you,
get on
guys.
with her
We'll
meeting.
stay around. Thank you so much.
thanks everyone.